I watched from my car as the SEC inspector taped the orange violation notice to the glass doors. My coffee had gone cold an hour ago, but I kept holding the cup, feeling the weight of it in my hands. Across the street, Horizon Capital Trust, the building I'd protected for 11 years, was being shut down. My phone buzzed for the 6th time that morning. Derek Hastings calling again. I let it ring through to voicemail. 6 weeks ago, Derek had sat across from me in a glass-walled conference room and declared my position no longer necessary. He'd said it with a smile, like he was doing me a favor. Risk management was being automated, he explained. They were embracing algorithmic confidence. My severance was generous, 4 months' pay. But the message was clear. I was old-fashioned, outdated, unnecessary. What Derek didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I wasn't just a risk manager. I was the only thing standing between Horizon and complete regulatory collapse. And I'd just removed myself from every critical system they had. My name is Arlene Whitmore. I'm 38 years old, and I've spent the last 11 years keeping Horizon Capital Trust from imploding. That's not dramatic. It's just fact. I built the compliance monitoring systems. I maintained the relationships with federal regulators. I manually flagged the high-risk accounts that their fancy algorithms missed. I was the one who caught the money laundering scheme in 2022. I was the one who identified the liquidity crisis before it became a disaster. But to the new executive team, I was just overhead. A cautious voice that slowed down their aggressive growth targets. Derek Hastings, our 32-year-old chief strategy officer, had joined 6 months ago from a failed fintech startup. He wore expensive suits and spoke entirely in buzzwords. He thought risk management was something you could automate with software. He had no idea how fragile the systems really were, or how much of it depended on me personally. When he told me my position was being eliminated, I didn't argue. I just nodded. Because I already had a plan. The meeting happened on a Tuesday morning in January. Derek sat at the head of the conference table with Patricia from HR beside him. They had the look people get when they're about to deliver bad news and pretend it's good. Arlene, we've been reviewing organizational structure, Derek began. His voice had that practiced smoothness. We're streamlining operations and embracing more automated risk assessment tools. I folded my hands on the table and waited. Your role has been incredibly valuable, he continued. But we're moving toward a more algorithmic approach. We've hired someone with expertise in AI-driven compliance monitoring. My replacement. Of course. His name is Todd Brennan, Derek said. He'll be starting next week. We'd like you to spend your final 2 weeks training him on basic operational procedures. Basic operational procedures. Like that was all I did. Patricia slid a severance package across the table. 4 months' salary. I glanced at it without picking it up. When's my last day? I asked calmly. February 14th, Patricia said. 2 weeks. I nodded slowly. I'll make sure everything is documented. That afternoon, I went back to my desk and opened a file I'd been keeping for 3 years. It was titled Critical Manual Interventions, Emergency Use Only. Inside were 47 pages detailing every place where the automated systems failed, every account that required personal oversight, every regulatory relationship that depended on trust, not technology. The SEC had an examiner named Audrey Finch who'd worked with me for 6 years. She trusted my judgment. When I flagged something suspicious, she investigated it immediately. But she didn't trust Horizon Capital. She trusted me. The liquidity stress tests ran automatically, but I manually adjusted the parameters based on real-time market conditions. The algorithms used static assumptions that were dangerously outdated. The biometric authentication system required my fingerprint to access high-level surveillance tools. I designed it that way to prevent unauthorized access. Nobody else could get in. Over the next 2 weeks, I was going to train Todd on the surface-level dashboards and automated reports. But I wasn't going to mention any of this. I saved the file to an encrypted drive and locked it away. Then I started planning my exit. Todd Brennan arrived on Monday morning wearing designer sneakers and a company hoodie like he was attending a startup pitch meeting. He introduced himself with confident handshake and immediately started talking about his proprietary risk algorithms. I smiled politely and pulled up the main dashboard. "This is the compliance monitoring system," I said. "Green means normal activity. Yellow is a warning flag. Red requires immediate attention." Todd nodded, taking notes on his tablet. "Pretty straightforward. I'm assuming most of this feeds into the AI models." "Some of it," I said vaguely. What I didn't say, the AI models were garbage. They generated hundreds of false positives and missed critical red flags. I manually reviewed every alert and decided which ones mattered. But Todd didn't need to know that. Over the next 3 days, I showed him the dashboards, the reporting templates, the automated alerts. I explained the color-coded matrices and monthly compliance reports. Todd kept interrupting with suggestions about gamifying the risk scores and using blockchain for audit trails. I nodded and said, "Interesting idea." Then I moved on. I documented every training session and emailed summaries to Patricia. I was building a paper trail showing I'd fulfilled my obligations. When everything collapsed, nobody could say I hadn't tried. On my second to last day, I started making phone calls. First was Audrey Finch at the SEC. "Hi Audrey, just wanted to let you know I'm transitioning out of Horizon. My last day is Friday." There was a long pause. "You're leaving?" "Arlene, you're the only person there I trust." "I know," I said. "But the company is moving in a different direction. My replacement is Todd Brennan. I'm sure he'll reach out if he needs anything." What I didn't say, Todd didn't know Audrey existed. He didn't know which regulators mattered or how to navigate their expectations. When the next audit came, Audrey wasn't going to give Horizon the benefit of the doubt anymore. Next I called the forensic accounting firm that conducted our quarterly fraud audits. "Hi Richard, this is Arlene from Horizon. Just a heads up that I'm leaving the company. Wanted to make sure you're set up with the main contact line going forward." Richard's voice dropped. "Wait, you're leaving?" "Arlene, we only kept that contract because of you." "Who's taking over?" "Todd Brennan. New hire. I'm sure he'll be in touch." Richard was quiet for a moment. "Our contract is up for renewal next month. If you're not there, I'm not sure we're renewing." "I understand," I said. "You have to do what's best for your firm." One by one, the vendors made similar decisions. They'd worked with me, not Horizon. Without me, they had no reason to stay. My final task was the biometric authentication system. It controlled access to the real-time trading surveillance portal, the system that monitored every transaction for suspicious patterns. It required a fingerprint scan to log in. On Thursday afternoon, Todd tried to access it. The screen prompted him for credentials. He typed his login and password. Access denied. He frowned. "Hey Arlene, I can't get into the surveillance system." I walked over and placed my thumb on the scanner. The system unlocked immediately. "You'll need to submit a request to IT security," I said. "It usually takes about 6 weeks for approval and device provisioning." 6 weeks. Todd looked alarmed. "Can't you just add me?" "It's a regulatory requirement," I explained. "The SEC mandates biometric authentication for surveillance access. It's a zero-trust architecture." What I didn't mention, I was the only person currently authorized. And I designed the system that way specifically. Todd shifted uncomfortably. "Can you just stay logged in until my access comes through?" I smiled. "That would violate compliance protocols. But don't worry. The automated alerts will flag anything urgent." I logged out and walked away. Todd stared at the locked screen, realizing for the first time that maybe this job was more complicated than he'd thought. Friday was my last day. Patricia scheduled an exit interview. "Is there anything we could have done differently to retain you?" she asked, reading from a script. I could have told her the truth. That they'd fired me. That they'd replaced expertise with arrogance. That they were about to collapse under the weight of their own stupidity. Instead, I smiled. "No, Patricia. I think this is the right move for everyone. The company is evolving." "And you feel confident that Todd is prepared?" "Absolutely." I lied. "I've provided comprehensive training and documentation. He has access to all the core systems." Technically true. He had access to the systems that didn't matter. I signed the exit paperwork, handed in my keycard, and walked out the door. As I crossed the parking lot, I didn't look back. But I did take out my phone and download an app that would send me anonymous alerts whenever Horizon's risk metrics crossed critical thresholds. I wasn't monitoring them to help. I was monitoring them to know exactly when to make my next move. The trap was set. Now I just had to wait. 2 weeks after I left, the first warning appeared. A junior trader executed a series of high-frequency options trades that generated unusual profit patterns. The automated surveillance system flagged it and sent an alert to Todd's dashboard. Todd saw the alert, read the summary, and dismissed it as statistical noise. He clicked "Acknowledge" and moved on. What he didn't know, this was exactly the pattern that preceded a fraudulent trading scheme I'd caught 2 years ago. The trader was testing boundaries, seeing if anyone was watching. In my era, I would have pulled his full transaction history, interviewed him personally, and flagged his account for enhanced monitoring. Todd did none of this. The trader, realizing nobody was paying attention, got bolder. 3 days later, he executed a much larger trade that violated risk limits. The system flagged it again. Todd dismissed it again. By the end of the month, the trader had built a massive position in a liquid derivatives, far beyond his authorized limits. He was betting a tech stock would collapse. Instead, the stock surged. His position imploded. In a single day, he lost $47 million of the firm's capital. The news hit the financial press within hours. Horizon Capital Trust reports major trading loss. I saw it on my phone while sitting in a coffee shop. I took a sip of my latte and smiled. My phone buzzed. Derek Hastings calling. I let it ring through to voicemail. He called again. And again. I listened to his messages later. The first one was professional. "Arlene, hi, it's Derek. Could you give me a call when you have a chance? Need to pick your brain about something." The second was more urgent. "Arlene, we're in a situation here. I'd really appreciate if you could call me back as soon as possible." The third was desperate. "Arlene, please. We need your help. Call me." I deleted all 3 messages. I wasn't ready to engage yet. I wanted them to suffer a little longer. That afternoon, I received an email from the board of directors. Not from Derek, from the board chairman himself. "Ms. Whitmore, we've become aware of operational challenges following your departure. We would like to discuss a consulting engagement. Please contact me at your earliest convenience." I didn't respond. Not yet. Let them panic. While Horizon was bleeding, I was building. I'd rented a small office downtown and filed paperwork for an LLC, Whitmore Risk Advisory. Within 2 weeks of launching, I received my first client inquiry. A boutique investment firm that had heard through industry channels that I was available. Then another. Then another. My reputation, invisible inside Horizon, was suddenly my greatest asset. People knew I'd survived Horizon. And everyone in the industry was watching Horizon burn. By the end of my first month, I had 3 retainer clients paying me a combined $30,000 per month. More than I'd made annually at Horizon. I was working half the hours, answering to no one, and building something that belonged to me. Every time my phone buzzed with another missed call from Derek, I smiled and got back to work. They'd declared my position unnecessary. Now they were learning exactly how necessary I'd been. 6 weeks after I left, The second shoe dropped. Horizon's liquidity stress test came back clean. Plenty of buffer, no red flags. The CFO, Vincent Caldwell, breathed a sigh of relief and forwarded the report to the board. But the test was wrong. The automated system used static assumptions that didn't account for real-world volatility. I used to manually adjust those parameters. Todd didn't know how. 2 weeks later, one of Horizon's largest clients withdrew $300 million to fund an acquisition. It was within their rights, but it required immediate rebalancing. Todd saw the withdrawal in the system and assumed it was routine. He didn't stress test the impact. He didn't alert the trading desk. By the time Vincent realized what happened, Horizon was dangerously close to violating regulatory capital requirements. The kind of violation that triggers federal intervention. Vincent called an emergency board meeting. According to sources still inside the company, he stood at the head of the table and asked one question. Where the hell is Arlene Whitmore? Derek had no answer. Vincent turned to him. You told me the transition was seamless. It should have been, Derek stammered. The systems are automated. The systems are failing. Vincent shouted. We've lost $47 million. Our vendors have abandoned us, and now we're facing a liquidity crisis. What exactly have we automated? That afternoon, I received a personal call from Vincent Caldwell. I answered this time. Arlene, thank God. We need you. His voice was strained. I can't help you, Vincent, I said calmly. I'm no longer an employee. I know. But we're in crisis mode here. I'm prepared to bring you back as a consultant. Name your rate. I thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. $500 per hour. 40-hour minimum monthly retainer. Plus expenses. And I report directly to the board, not to Derek. Vincent didn't hesitate. Done. When can you start? I'll send over a contract, I said. Once it's signed, I can begin Monday. I hung up and drafted the agreement. I made sure every clause was ironclad. They'd burned me once. I wasn't giving them another chance. The contract arrived signed Saturday morning. Monday, I walked back into Horizon Capital Trust. Not as an employee. As the person who held all the cards. The office went silent when I walked through the doors. People whispered. Someone dropped a coffee mug. Todd, sitting at what used to be my desk, looked up and went pale. Derek emerged from his office, clearly caught off guard. Arlene, I didn't realize you were starting today. I'm not starting, I said coolly. I'm consulting. The board engaged me to conduct a risk assessment. I'll need access to the trading surveillance system, compliance documentation, and all SEC correspondence. Derek stammered. I'm not sure we have an available office. Conference room B will work, I said, already walking toward it. I'll also need Todd to prepare a full report on every risk incident since my departure. On my desk by end of day. I didn't wait for a response. I walked into the conference room, set down my bag, and closed the door. Through the glass wall, I could see the entire office watching. I opened my laptop and got to work. This time, I wasn't cleaning up their mess out of loyalty. I was doing it for $500 an hour. And I was going to document every single failure with my name nowhere near it. I spent 3 days digging through Horizon systems. What I found was worse than I expected. The trading loss wasn't isolated. It was a symptom of systemic failure. Todd had been dismissing alerts without investigation. The liquidity models were running on outdated assumptions. The vendor relationships had completely collapsed. I compiled everything into a 34-page report titled, Risk Assessment and Systemic Failures, Horizon Capital Trust. It was clinical, factual, and devastating. On Thursday evening, I emailed it to Vincent and the full board. Friday morning, I walked into the boardroom. Derek and Todd were already there, looking like defendants at a trial. Vincent gestured for me to begin. I connected my laptop to the projector. The first slide read, Critical failures, February 14th to March 30th. I walked them through each incident, the dismissed alerts, the ignored warnings, the lapsed vendor contracts. I showed them the timeline of the trading loss and explained exactly how it could have been prevented. Then I displayed a comparison slide, risk incidents under previous leadership versus current leadership. Under my tenure, 11 years, 0 major losses, 3 near misses prevented. Under Todd's tenure, 6 weeks, $147 million loss, 12 dismissed alerts, 0 vendor oversight. The room was silent. Vincent looked at Derek. You told us the transition was seamless. Derek had no answer. Vincent turned to me. What's your recommendation? I didn't hesitate. You need a qualified risk officer, not a data scientist. Someone with regulatory expertise and vendor relationships. I paused. I can provide interim oversight, but I'm not interested in returning as an employee. My consulting engagement ends in 60 days. Vincent nodded slowly. Understood. Thank you, Arlene. As I packed up my laptop, I saw Derek slump in his chair. He knew what was coming. Monday morning, Derek Hastings was fired. The board delivered the news in the same conference room where he'd eliminated my position. Security escorted him out within an hour, his belongings in a cardboard box. Todd was demoted to a junior analyst role with no authority. His salary was cut by 30%. Word spread through the office within minutes. Someone put my old nameplate back on the desk as a tribute. I heard about it from my temporary office. I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no vindication. Just the quiet certainty that gravity always wins. While I was consulting at Horizon, my own firm was growing. I'd hired 2 junior analysts to help with client work. By April, I had 7 retainer clients. Revenue was approaching $50,000 per month. One afternoon, I received a call from Summit Ridge Capital, Horizon's largest competitor. Their CEO wanted to meet. We had lunch at an upscale restaurant downtown. He got straight to the point. We've been watching what happened at Horizon. Everyone in the industry knows what you did. I sipped my water. What I did was my job. Exactly, he said. And we want you to do it for us. Not as an employee, as an independent advisor. We'll provide resources, staff, and access to our client network. You'll have complete autonomy. He named a figure that made my coffee taste different. A $2 million acquisition of my consulting firm, plus 40% of ongoing revenues. I negotiated one additional term. Summit Ridge would not engage with Horizon Capital Trust in any capacity. I wanted to ensure my former employer couldn't benefit from my success through a backdoor relationship. Summit agreed. I signed the deal. Within 6 months, Whitmore Risk Advisory grew from a 3-person shop to a team of 12, serving 40 clients across the country. Meanwhile, Horizon's problems were accelerating. In May, the SEC opened a formal investigation into the trading loss. They wanted to know how a junior trader had lost $47 million without anyone stopping him. Where was the risk management oversight? Why didn't the surveillance systems catch it? The answer was simple. I would have caught it. Todd didn't. The SEC assigned Audrey Finch to lead the investigation. I knew the moment I saw her name in the industry news. Audrey was thorough, exacting, and allergic to excuses. She requested all compliance records since my departure. When she saw the gaps, the dismissed alerts, the lapsed vendor contracts, the failed stress tests, she escalated the investigation. Horizon was now facing potential fines in the tens of millions. Vincent called me in June. Arlene, the SEC wants to interview you. I figured they would, I said. Will you cooperate? Of course. I have nothing to hide. The interview took place in a federal building downtown. Audrey sat across from me with a recording device and a thick folder. Ms. Whitmore, you were the risk manager at Horizon Capital Trust for 11 years. Can you describe your responsibilities? I walked her through everything. The manual interventions, the regulatory relationships, the biometric systems. I explained how the automated tools were supplemental, not primary. Audrey leaned forward. Were you aware that your departure would create operational gaps? Yes, I said. Did you communicate this to management? I documented everything in training materials and exit interviews. I explained which systems required manual oversight. Did management acknowledge these concerns? I paused. They believed automation would be sufficient. Audrey made a note. But you didn't believe that? No, I said. The systems weren't designed to run independently. They required human judgment. Why didn't you refuse to leave until a proper replacement was trained? I met her eyes. Because I was terminated. My position was declared unnecessary. Audrey's pen stopped moving. You were fired? Yes. They hired Todd Brennan to replace me. I trained him on basic operational procedures as requested, but the advanced protocols weren't part of the training scope. I slid a folder across the table. These are my exit interview notes, training logs, and documentation requests. Everything is time-stamped. Audrey reviewed the documents. Her expression hardened. When the interview ended, she shook my hand. Thank you for your cooperation, Ms. Whitmore. I walked out knowing exactly what she was thinking. Horizon had fired the only person keeping them compliant. And now they were going to pay for it. The SEC investigation concluded in August. Horizon Capital Trust agreed to a settlement, $12 million in fines for inadequate risk controls and trading supervision failures. The settlement agreement explicitly cited the departure of senior risk management personnel and failure to maintain adequate oversight. The firm was also required to hire an independent compliance monitor for 2 years. The financial press covered the story extensively. Headlines read, Horizon Capital fined after risk officer departure, and investment firm's costly lesson in risk management. My name wasn't mentioned in the articles, but everyone in the industry knew. I became a legend in risk management circles, the woman who'd held a firm together for 11 years, whose departure caused immediate collapse. Job offers flooded in. Headhunters called daily. But I wasn't interested in working for anyone else. I'd built something better. In September, I was invited to speak at the National Risk Management Conference. 200 people filled the ballroom as I took the stage. The title of my talk, When Organizations Ignore Risk, a Case Study in Systemic Failure. I didn't name Horizon directly, but everyone knew. I walked through the warning signs, the dismissed alerts, the false confidence in automation. I explained how risk management isn't about algorithms. It's about judgment, relationships, and institutional knowledge. The risk was always visible, I said, my voice carrying across the silent room. The question is whether leadership chooses to see it. When you eliminate the people who tell you what you don't want to hear, you don't eliminate the risk. You just eliminate your ability to see it coming. The audience erupted in applause. Afterward, young analysts lined up to meet me, to thank me, to tell me I'd inspired them to stand firm when executives dismissed their concerns. I shook their hands and offered advice. Document everything. Build your network. And know your worth, because they'll try to convince you it's less than it is. That evening, I sat in my hotel room overlooking the city. My phone buzzed with congratulatory messages. I thought about the conference room where Derek had declared my position unnecessary. The casual cruelty of it. The assumption that I was disposable. I didn't feel vengeful. I didn't feel bitter. I felt free. Because the greatest revenge isn't destruction. It's building something so successful that your former employer becomes a cautionary tale. I opened my laptop and began drafting a proposal for my next venture. A risk management training academy for mid-career professionals who'd been overlooked and undervalued. I was going to teach them what I'd learned. That your value isn't determined by the people who fire you. It's determined by what you build after they do. 6 months later, Vincent Caldwell resigned as CFO of Horizon Capital Trust. The board had lost confidence in his leadership after the SEC settlement. Derek Hastings never worked in finance again. His LinkedIn profile listed him as an independent consultant, which usually meant unemployed. Todd Brennan left the industry entirely and went back to school. Horizon survived. Barely. They hired a veteran risk officer, someone with 30 years of experience, and spent millions rebuilding the systems I'd created. They never contacted me again. I didn't need them to. My academy launched in January with 20 students. By June, we had 50. I taught them how to identify red flags, how to document concerns, how to protect themselves when leadership ignored warnings. I taught them that speaking up might cost them their job, but staying silent would cost them their integrity. One afternoon, I received a letter. It was from Derek Hastings. He'd written it on plain paper, no company letterhead. Arlene, I know I can't undo what happened. I made a terrible mistake letting you go. I didn't understand how much you did or how important you were. I hope you're doing well. I'm sorry. I read it twice. Then I filed it away without responding. Sorry wasn't enough. Sorry didn't undo the humiliation of being declared unnecessary. Sorry didn't give me back the months of stress and uncertainty. Derek was sorry because he got caught, not because he understood what he'd done wrong. Some people don't deserve forgiveness. They just deserve to be forgotten. Last week, I was invited to Horizon's annual risk management conference, not as an employee, but as a keynote speaker. I stood in the same building where I'd spent 11 years. The same conference room where Derek had eliminated my position. Vincent was gone. Derek was gone. Todd was gone. But the company remained. I spoke for 30 minutes about the importance of valuing institutional knowledge, about listening to the people who do the work, about understanding that automation is a tool, not a replacement for expertise. When I finished, the room stood and applauded. Afterward, a young woman approached me. She looked nervous. I'm the new risk manager, she said. I wanted to say thank you. I read all your documentation. It's the only reason I know how to do this job. I smiled. You're welcome. If you ever need help, call me. She nodded, eyes bright with relief. As I walked out of the building for the last time, I thought about how far I'd come. From invisible employee to industry leader. From disposable to indispensable. It started with 5 words in a conference room. Your position is no longer necessary. And it ended with me proving that some positions can never be replaced. The risk was always visible. I just made sure everyone could see it now.